From Studio 31 inside City National Arena, presented by Smith's Food and Drug Stores, this is a special edition of the Knights Report. Daren Millard in Studio 31, along with VGK insider Gary Lawless. The Vegas Golden Knights announcing today the club has made a change to its coaching staff.
Yeah, Kelly McCrimmon is going to address the media and our fan base on this stream in a few minutes. Pete DeBoer has been relieved of his duties, and we'll hear more about that from Kelly. Pete's a great coach. It was really fun to work with him, and the best expression I've ever heard about professional sport: great game, crappy business. There are days like this that they're just terrible. You know, Pete's poured his heart and soul into this organization, did a great job over really trying times throughout the whole. He took over just before the pandemic and then ran this team through that whole time and did a great job.
Send you downstairs and Kelly McCrimmon at the podium.
Members of the media for coming down here on short notice. Difficult decision, difficult day, but this morning I met with Pete and let him know of our decision to relieve him of his duties. Pete came on to or joined our organization on the front end of a pandemic right at in January of 2022. Coached our team through some extremely challenging times. Enjoyed great success with our team, playing in 6 playoff rounds, advancing to 2 conference finals. Wish Pete the best in his next post. I'm sure that he'll be quickly hired and working in the National Hockey League again this season, or next season. I'd also like to thank Steve Spott and Ryan Mcgill, who have also been relieved of their duties. Ryan, of course, was part of our original coaching staff and has been with the organization for 5 seasons. Steve came shortly after Peter. Both were really important members of our coaching staff. We will be retaining Ryan Craig and Misha Donskov. Misha has a really unique skill set and is now in just completed his second year on our coaching staff. He's a really valuable member of the organization. And with Ryan Craig, we've got a real good young coach that gets better every year and will be really important for our team moving forward. Goaltending coach Mike Rosati will have the opportunity to interview with the new head coach, and we'll have further decisions being made at that time. I wanted Mike to have the opportunity to meet with the new head coach. I met with all coaches this morning and went through this with them. With respect to the process of how we got to where we are today, I mentioned at year-end availability there'd be meetings between myself and Pete that would follow over the next couple of weeks. That's exactly what happened. I also had discussions with George McPhee. We deliberated on this long and hard. We did not make this decision quickly. And once George and I were aligned in terms of what we thought the best course of action would be, we met with our owner Bill Foley late last week. Bill offered his support to our decision. In terms of the why, it's here's where we're at as an organization right now. We had 3 very compressed seasons. I really felt as the season wound down, you could feel the fatigue that had gathered over time. We've got a 4.5 month off season, which I think is going to be extremely important for our group. We missed the playoffs, which is humbling for a team no matter what the reasons were for how that happened. And I think what it's going to give us is an opportunity in the fall to be incredibly rested, rehabbed, recharged, excited. And as we went through it, I felt that we could enhance that by having a new voice leading our team into next season. The decision was made based on next year. The decision was not made based on last year. I'm not going to be critical of Pete or point out specifics as to why this decision was made. I've got a lot of respect for Pete as a man. I've got a lot of respect for him as a coach. And again, these decisions are made for the future, and that's why we're here today to discuss this. Happy to take your questions. I think that's covers my opening statement.
We'll open it up to questions and ask that you raise your hand and we'll pass the mic around. Kelly, in your final or your press conference with us after the season, and there wasn't one press conference or availability this year where injuries weren't mentioned.
Yep.
Your players, your coaches, you, everybody. So I ask, a coach has no control over that.
Yep.
So is there anything else he could have done to save his job? Because the number one crux that you guys mentioned as the reason you weren't as good as you wanted to be, he can't control that.
I completely agree with that assessment, Ed. We've talked openly about the impact that the injuries had on our season. I say again, and maybe it's hard for people to understand because we're in the results business, but the decision is about next year. It's about starting with a fresh voice. It's about starting with a re-energized team. It's about having a group of players with something to prove, and that's the attitude that I want to take into next season. This was part of that.
Kelly, what do you mentioned, kind of having a fresh voice next year. What do you think that can do for this team, or what are you hoping that does for this team next year?
Well, it ties into what I've already mentioned. Again, we haven't had an off season like this one, and I don't think that we've ever been in need of one as much as we are right now with the different players that are rehabbing different injuries, with just the accumulative fatigue that we've had over 3 really compressed seasons, long playoff runs, and what have you. So I'm expecting a sense of excitement. I'm expecting guys being very anxious to get to training camp. I keep using the term, a mindset of something to prove. I touched on it in my opening statement about missing the playoffs being a humbling experience for a team. I think all of those things combined together to help to shape that attitude heading into the next season.
Hey, Kelly, what attributes or characteristics are you looking for in the next head coach?
Yeah, good question. We haven't put any work into who those candidates are yet. These were independent decisions, which the offseason allows you to do. The leadership, the bench management, the ability to communicate with players, all of the expected answers is what I would give you. I don't think that we're out to solve a deficiency we felt we had. We're gonna go through a process where we hire the best possible candidate we can hire, and bring him in here to lead our team.
Willie and Danny. Kelly, 5 years in, 2.5 years ago, you wanted to make a change. You were looking for a fresh voice, re-energize the team. Now you're talking about a fresh voice. As a general manager, is it bothersome that after 5 years, you're looking for a third fresh voice to run a team that's been to the playoffs 4 of the 5 years, 3 conference finals, a Stanley Cup final?
Willie, it's a good question. You do what you believe in your heart to be the right thing. And I've said to you people different times, it's usually not the easiest thing. It would have been easy for us to march ahead. But I really felt there was an opportunity here to help our team with a change there. That's the bottom line. So, you trust your judgment as a manager. We went through a process where, you evaluate the discussion and the decision based on any different number of parameters or talking points. But at the end of the process, it speaks to your judgment, and that was the decision that we felt was the right one.
Danny, that
Kelly, Willie kind of asked my question already, so I guess I'll go ahead and add to that. I guess, how important is this next hire for more of a long-term solution as someone who you feel like can lead this group going
Well,
forward?
we've had, I know where your question's coming from. We've played 5 seasons. I think we've had really good coaching 5 years. So that to me would be an objective, right? I think that, Gerard did a good job in his time here. Pete did a good job in his time here. We expect that the next coach is going to do a real good job for us. We're going to try to do the best that we can to, have the personnel for him to be successful. And, I don't know exactly what you're asking. If you're wondering, is this guy going to work here for the next 5 years? I don't know that. I don't know who he is, let alone how long he's going to be here.
Kelly, you mentioned you guys haven't really started the process yet, but I guess what does that look like for you, this search? Obviously, last time Pete came in pretty quickly, so do you expect kind of a similar short turnaround, or do you have a lengthier timeline this time?
Yeah, it'll be lengthier, and again, I touched on it earlier, that's what the offseason allows you to do, so we'll be thorough. We'll be thorough. We'll look at We'll look at all the candidates that we can identify. We'll work with people in our organization that might have past affiliations with coaches or ideas. We'll solicit opinions from our pro staff, from our amateur staff that are people that are involved in the game at different levels. Obviously my own contacts, George McPhee, similarly, we'll identify who the candidates are and go through an interview process with them.
Ken and Jesse.
Bill had mentioned in a recent interview that he thought the team kind of lost their identity and lost their way, and he said he wants to be a little bit more vocal. I'm wondering, first of all, if you agree that you're kind of lost their identity, and then second, what does that look like for you that he could be more vocal this summer?
Well, Bill's been involved from day one, and he's, that expansion year, I keep talking to you guys about that different times. So not the inaugural season where we were playing, but the expansion year where we were meeting so regularly. Gave Bill a great opportunity to learn, gave Bill a great opportunity to work with the people in the organization. I think he's got a great deal of confidence in George McPhee and myself. He's always been involved. So I know the article that you're referring to. He's included in everything that we do. This decision is a real good example where, after George and I made a final decision, we went to Bill. Bill is supportive, so that to me will continue. And with respect to the identity of last year's team, it's been talked about quite a bit. And I guess to defend the coaches, which sometimes is where you point a finger when you don't think your team has an identity. It was really challenging. It was really challenging to have an identity with our team, with the people that we missed. I know I mentioned a year-end availability. It wasn't just on the ice. We missed these people. It was off the ice. So I'm not concerned that we're searching for that. I expect really good things from our team this coming season. I think that the culture of our organization is always going to be a competitive advantage and something that's relied on within our organization to be strong and to help us. And I think the identity, flows from that. And again, a new coach is going to have his stamp that he puts on things as well. But we've got great leadership throughout our hockey team. Just didn't have access to a lot of it for long stretches this year.
Jesse, then Willie and Ed.
A couple weeks ago, you mentioned that the talks with Pete would be about like his vision, seeing if it matches up with you guys, and you mentioned that this is about looking forward. I'm just curious, how different do you want this team to
That's
play?
what happens when you don't put it up here, Steve. Hey, that's where it usually is. I could have answered it for you. Sorry, Jesse, I got distracted.
No worries. You mentioned 2 weeks ago that you wanted to talk with Pete to see his vision. You mentioned that this is a decision about the future. I'm curious, just how different do you want this hockey team to play? Is that part of this decision?
We had a lot of success with Pete. I'm not going to stand here and be critical of Pete. I think he's a really good coach. He's a good man. He's a good friend. So that's not part of it today for me. It's about looking ahead, and I know I've said that a number of times. It's not a cop-out. It's genuinely the basis of how these decisions are made. That's how you arrive at it. I don't have a lot more to offer on that, Jesse. I really don't. I understand the question, but I'm not trying to dodge it, but I just don't have a lot to offer. We met, we had lengthy meetings. I mean, I think Pete would tell you that we see things pretty similarly. I think consistently see things quite similarly.
Willie, then Ed, and Alan.
Kelly, the announcement came out at 9. Press conference started about 1. It's been about 4 hours. I'm not sure how it works. It's not like an application process, but I'm sure have agents or coaches in that 4-hour time. Have you already heard from anybody?
I've been tied up with conversations with other people in our organization that I just haven't had. I haven't had the chance to do any of that. But no, I haven't, Willie, to this point.
Kelly, no matter what, it's 3 and 5 years. So how much do you and George also look in the mirror and say, this is part of us as well?
All these decisions reflect on us, Ed, and I'm proud to stand behind them. I I don't have any trouble looking in the mirror with the decisions that we make or the things that we do. I don't have any trouble looking in the mirror and telling myself where I can be better. Also, I'm not above any of that. But as I touched on it with the earlier question, I believe we're doing the right thing. I believe it's the right decision. And when you believe that and you don't act on it, to me, that's poor management.
Alan McCrimmon, sorry.
I know you keep on mentioning the fresh voice next season theme here. Can you be a little more specific on what exactly you want, how you want the team to play that they weren't showing this year? Do you want them faster, harder, more intense? I mean, can you give a little more detail on what you're looking for the coaches to deliver, so there's some expectations on the table here?
Well, through 5 seasons, we've had stretches of great hockey. So I think we all know what it looks like when we play well. I mean, that's I think everybody knows. I think everybody wants the same thing. You want to have an offensive identity. You want to have depth up front. You want to play 4 lines, things that we didn't have an opportunity to do this year. I think we're really strong on defense. All of those things that you do in terms of your roster. And then, the coach's fingerprints certainly are going to go on style of play and that type of thing. But I think, without going into the weeds on it, you guys have watched, you've seen us, you know what we look like when we play well. And that's what we hope to get back to. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There's a style of game that I think works for us and looks good on us. It's not unlike what you see from some of the other top teams. Like I think in the NHL, there's a lot of similarities. Sometimes it's not what you do; it's how you do it, right? I think that there's a lot of teams that look to do things quite similarly, but some teams do it better than others, right?
Ken and Willie?
You just said that you don't think you're above kind of saying you need to be better. Do you have examples of places you think you can be better as management?
I'm not going to go into a full confession here, Ken. Just trust me that I evaluate my performance and I'm honest with myself.
Kelly, I'll ask you this with full respect to your position and the decisions you've made. You've said that you've stood by, you and George stand by your decisions.
Yep.
And that it's a matter of looking forward. But when the second decision doesn't work out, is there ever a time where you look back and maybe regret firing Gerard, or not at all?
Well, and maybe I should answer your question better, Ken. Yeah, we evaluate all the decisions that we make. We evaluate how they play out. I evaluate how I work with my amateur staff, my pro staff, how we run a meeting. Those are things that I constantly evaluate myself on. It's a fair question, and it's a question based on something I commented on, so I'd answer that probably more correctly. Willie, I don't know how you can say that Pete DeBoer's tenure in Vegas as the head coach of the hockey club was anything but successful.
It wasn't successful, I'm just saying he's fired, so I'm just curious if there was ever a time that you think to yourself, maybe we shouldn't have done that, that's all.
Well, it's an easy answer for me, but I'm not going to go back in time and have those kind of discussions. But it's an easy answer for me.
Kelly, your first 2 coaches had NHL experience with obviously the expectations with this club. Do you think you need another coach with NHL experience, or would you be willing to go to a first-time?
We'll see. There's we're not pigeonholing ourselves into one category. Head guy, former player. There's good coaches that have varying backgrounds. We've had 2 good coaches. One guy was a former player, one guy wasn't. Both guys were effective at delivering their message. So we'll look at the candidates. I don't know at this point.
We'll go to Chris and David.
Kelly, I was just wondering, you mentioned the COVID and the fatigue and the condensed seasons and all that. And I'm kind of thinking, and then you mentioned he was so successful, DeBoer. Did player personnel voices kind of lead to the start of today's decision?
The player, sorry?
Did players' voices kind of lead
the players
to the
themselves.
start?
The players themselves?
Yeah, the players themselves lead to the start of today's
that's a good
season.
question. No, this is done outside of any discussions with players. I conduct exit meetings every year like every general manager does, but it wasn't an expedition to find out what the coaches do well or don't do well. It was about a lot of other different things. It's a decision that ultimately came from me. Talked with George. George felt similarly to myself. We went to Bill, and here we are today. So I don't I don't want to suggest that it's easy. It's not. It's not easy. It's really hard to make these changes. You're talking about good people and good coaches, so it's not easy. But as I mentioned earlier, you do what you think's in the best interest of the organization. That's always your number one mandate, and that's what we think that we've done here today. I thought you were doing something else.
Yeah, I know.
What the hell are you doing here?
I know. Let everybody else ask the questions first.
Yeah.
And then all right, I'll throw this
Are
out.
you as angry today?
Yeah, probably. But
Okay. Okay.
I'll be nice.
Okay.
Do you have a timeline on Robin? How much does the new coach kind of factor in with the goaltending and, maybe his ability to work with the goaltenders and things like that, I guess. I'll leave it there.
This is the question with respect to his injury?
Yes.
Surgery went well, is what we know. I don't think they're going to know a timeline until we get, probably a month into the rehab. Would be just a guess. That's not going to vary based on who the coach is or isn't. Just on, do you have any more on Robin? Because I've got some other injury news I wanted to get to. Okay. Mark Stone is been seeing consultants and meeting with doctors, meeting through our training staff. He's got another meeting tomorrow in LA. It appears quite likely that he'll have back surgery on Wednesday and would be available for training camp. It would be rehabbed over that period of time. And again, that's not 100% for certain, but it's certainly the most likely outcome at this time, which the reason I bring it up unsolicited is I think it's great news. I was hoping that would be what the solution might look like, and it's obviously something that our fans are interested in. And I know just from talking to Mark this morning, he was at the facility earlier with Jay. I sure think he's excited about this outcome also.
I wanted to ask about Ryan Mcgill. From the outside, he seemed very pivotal in the development of your young defensemen over the 5 years, whether it be Shea or Zach or Nick Hague. Just what went into that decision? It seems a little curious from the outside.
Yeah, that's a fair question, David. And, I've known Ryan probably 30 years, 25 for sure. I've known him as a head coach in the Western League for many, many years. It was my recommendation that Gerard meet with him when he was hired here initially. And I thought Gilly did a great job. I thought he got better and better. And I think that really, David, I would say it to you this way, we're making some changes. It's been 5 years with a similar group. I just felt that maybe it was the right way to go. I met with Ryan about it this morning. I got a ton of respect for Ryan as a person and of his work, but that was the feeling that I had.
Hey, Kelly. Sorry about the phone, by the way. As respect to the roster as it'll look like for opening night next year, you have a lot of hard decisions to make. You get cap compliant, you got UFAs, you have RFAs. Could you speak to where things are at currently as you go through that process?
Yep. Yeah, well, we have time on our hands. We're 4 months, I think, today from training camp or thereabouts. And, all of those are really important aspects of the offseason of an NHL team. We've got work to do in some of those areas, and there's work to do that we want to do in some of those areas. That's, you didn't mention the amateur draft, which is a real focal point for the organization as well. So you work with, all your different, constituents of the organization to prepare for, each of those scenarios. We had a call yesterday with our pro staff. We've got meetings all next week with our amateur staff. Those are that's all ongoing. That's that's going to be things that we take care of here in the offseason.
Go to Willie and then we'll finish up with Brian.
Kelly, I know you said you've been busy all day and then the process gets started. The calls will come in, but from yours and George's standpoint, in two-part question, do you also recruit and go after candidates? And I'll just ask a question that's on everybody's mind. Is Barry Trotz somebody that you'd be interested in talking to?
Well, I think that we'll identify the people that we are interested in, and I don't know if that'll be 8 names, 10 names, 6 names. I don't know that for sure. We'll look at a lot of names. There's going to be people that reach out to us, and we may include them as people that we're interested in, and there's going to be some real good people that reach out that we might not be interested in. But to speak to a specific candidate, as you've asked, it's just not the right time to have that discussion. We're going to start at 2:00 today. We'll get going on that.
Kelly, you talked about kind of being thorough in terms of this search, but is there a timeline that you're working with? As you mentioned, the draft's coming up. We've got some important dates on the calendar. How important is it to have a coach in place prior to those?
Not important at all. Yeah, you need to be reasonable. Person needs to move a family. Person needs to hire a staff. Needs to get set up. But in terms of preparation for amateur draft, free agency, any of those things, it's not essential. It may well be, but it's not. We're not bound by any dates, certainly here in the short term.
I'm sorry, are you doing a development camp this year?
Yes, we are. You going to be still working?
Unfortunately, I will not probably.
Okay. Just asking for everybody else.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have our development camp. So what's the draft? Thursday, Friday. I believe our development camp will start on that Monday. So whatever that day is.
Tentatively the 11th to the 16th. We'll
Yeah.
get you those dates as soon as we can. All right. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thanks, everyone.
For the time. Thanks, Kelly.
Is with head coach Pete DeBoer, also splitting with Ryan Mcgill and Steve Spott, the organization retaining Ryan Craig and assistant coach Misha Donskov and goalie coach Mike Rosati. We'll have an opportunity to meet with the new head coach, but very upfront from Kelly McCrimmon in the sense that this was not any conversation about the success or the abilities of Pete DeBoer.
Well, Pete DeBoer took this team to 2 conference finals, and this year, under the worst circumstances, the Montreal Canadiens won the draft lottery, finished last. They're the only team that had more man games lost than the Vegas Golden Knights. Pete DeBoer did a good job this year to keep that team together. This is so Kelly's pretty clear in saying that it's not about what he's done. And Ryan Mcgill, Shea Theodore came here was a shadow of the player he is today, back and forth between the San Diego Gulls and the Anaheim Ducks. Braden McNabb was left exposed by the Los Angeles Kings. They didn't think he could play anymore. Alec Martinez got here in a situation where his numbers were awful. Zach Whitecloud became a player. Nick Hague became a player. Ryan Mcgill did a really good job as well. Team wants to win the Stanley Cup. That's Bill Foley's stated goal, and I won't sit here and tell you that Pete and Ryan couldn't be part of that solution, because everything I saw from them was that they came close. Missing the playoffs is a humbling situation. The entire organization takes a step back and looks at where are we going next. Kelly spoke to the players. He heard what they had to say, and in his view, from what we just heard him say, he wants this to be a new jumping off point for the organization. If you go back to the hunger, everyone talks about the misfits. I am here to tell you that was you can't bottle that. What happened in that year, that was a once in a lifetime thing. But there was so much good about that team in terms of there was no entitlement. There was no star structure in that dressing room. Everybody was, Marc-Andre Fleury was obviously a star, but he's not the kind of guy that acts like one. And that group had a special hunger. Getting back, I think automatically, some of that hunger returns because this team just missed the playoffs. I bet you Jonathan Marchessault wakes up every day and throws something, like he's not happy that they're not in. They had, a ton of injuries. Riley Smith missed the end of the season. Leonard missed the end of the season. Brossoit, they had surgery. Now he's explaining to us that Mark Stone's very likely going to have surgery as well. So there's clearly this has been viewed from upper management and ownership as a moment where we've been forced to take a step back and look at things. We've got to find a path forward, and they want a few new voices. I really understand what Kelly is saying when he says it's not about the results from last year. I think that would be foolish to fire Pete DeBoer and Ryan McGill based on last year, like on the results of last year. That wouldn't make sense to me because a big part of the results was taken out of their hands. Now, if you make a decision that you want to go in a different direction going forward for a variety of reasons, which, and Kelly is too respectful of those coaches. I should include Steve Spott in all of this as well. I'm thinking a lot about Ryan because he's been here for 5 years and Pete was the head coach. But Steve Spott was an important part of the team too the last couple of years. I can understand why he would say it's not about the results from last year because that wouldn't make sense to me. But I can understand that in this situation where you do want to come back next year and be different, be healthy, be hungrier. We heard the players. This isn't putting this on Pete and the other coaches. The players said we lost our identity. Now, I think a big part of them losing that identity was based on the injuries and they weren't all together, but they know better than anyone else. Better than the coaches, better than the management, better than me and you and all the fans that watch. They know better than us about their attitude and their identity, and if it needs to be fixed, he would have ascertained some stuff like that going through those meetings. And I get it. It would have been really hard for me to fire Turk. It would have been really hard for me to fire Pete. That's why, first of all, I don't have the knowledge base, but making those really hard decisions, I have trouble taking my daughter's phone away from her. These are hard decisions to make. But Kelly is charged, and Kelly and George, because they did this together, Kelly and George and Bill, they did it together. They have to look at things about where we're going. This is very similar to Lou Lamoriello firing Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz did a great job in New York on the island. They had really weird circumstances this year. So Lou didn't fire Barry based on last season. He made that decision based on where he wants to go forward. And Kelly, George, and Bill have a different vision moving forward.
It's not about Pete DeBoer's record, but do you think a small part of it is the chaos of the last 3 years and this being the opportunity to catch the breath as an organization?
Chaos not created by Pete. Chaos created by the pandemic.
Yeah.
And really good point. Really well said. Yeah, it's like, you are in a relationship with someone and, one of you gets fired or a parent dies or you lose your dog or whatever. There's all this stuff that's going on. And at some point in time, there's been a lot of damage inflicted on the relationship. And so then you decide it's not that I don't love you, but we both need a fresh start. We both need new air to breathe and new paint on the walls. So you make those decisions and you go forward, and then you bump into the person on the street 5 years later and they're pushing a baby carriage and you're pushing a baby carriage, and you smile at one another and you're really happy. That makes sense?
I didn't expect it to go down that path.
Neither did I.
But, yeah, I guess grand scheme of things, it does sort of go down the angle of where the Vegas Golden Knights are right now. So they're going to lean on the hockey operations department.
Pete DeBoer and Ryan Mcgill and Steve Spotter are all getting jobs really fast and are going to win a bunch of hockey games. That's their baby carriage. That's what I'm referring to, right? Those guys are Pete's a really good coach, a smart guy. Ryan Mcgill has a really unique touch with players.
Well, Zach Whitecloud, Shea Theodore, career years.
Yeah, those guys all love him. So, and Steve and Pete have won a ton of games together in junior hockey and in the National Hockey League. I don't imagine that where Pete goes, Steve won't go unless Steve wants to go and be a head coach somewhere else himself.
So Kelly says, if you believe it's the right decision, you're incumbent to act on that decision.
Yeah, that's Gerard was different from Pete in the sense that he was so beloved, and like from me and you to the fans, I still get people walk up to me at Albertsons and want to say, do you ever talk to Gerard? And I have a funny Gerard story I'm going to tell you in a second. Anyways, so it would have been really, and they'd been to the Stanley Cup final, and then it would have been easy for Kelly to say, all right, I'm going to let this play out, but he thought, we're not going down the path that we should be going. We're not going to win the Stanley Cup if we keep playing this way. I'm going to make a change, and he did, and the team almost got to the Stanley Cup. They lost to Dallas and some real hot goaltending. So that's he's been a manager and a coach and an owner and done all kinds of things in hockey for a long, long time. He knows the business very well, and he trusts himself, and he should, based on his track record. So he came to this conclusion, and that's it takes a unique person to be able to sort of say, this is the right decision. It's going to be really hard. I'm going to make it, and I'm going to execute it. He does that.
Do you have any thoughts, because you've been doing this for a long time, attributes of what the new head coach will bring to this team?
Well, a lot of what Pete had, for sure.
It's almost like Pete's the guy.
It's almost like if Pete was on the street right now, that you might go and hire Pete, right? You know what I mean? But there's you really made a good point about all of the stuff, all the chaos that this organization and all organizations went through, and that divorcing yourself from it by getting a new head coach and moving down a different path, kind of, it's like it is. It really is it's like painting the kitchen. You know what I mean? You walk in one day and it's blue. The next day you walk in and it's white, and it's a whole different room, right? Like that's what this is. So a guy's going to have to communicate. The misfits are not the misfits anymore. Like Marchessault's on a long-term deal. Carlson is. I would expect that, the team's going to try really hard to extend Riley Smith and keep him around. Braden McNabb's on another new deal. Someone has to, the person's going to have to communicate with them, but also hold them accountable. That's got to be, there's got to be
be a strong person.
Be a new phase in this organization where if there is entitlement, and I don't know if there is or not, but if there is, that it gets cleaned out. And it's got to be a team with they've got to get hungry again. That's for sure.
Not bound by any timeline either. Learned that.
No, and you know what I mean? There's going to be, just the list of names of guys that are out there is astonishing. You heard Barry Trotz. Mike Babcock's been on the street for a couple of years. Joel Quenneville is currently still not hasn't been cleared by the NHL, but he will be, and I bet he will be pretty soon. There's be guys in junior hockey that
John
that
Tortorella,
Kelly would know about. George McPhee hired Dale Hunter at one point in time, and Dale was, by all accounts, a success. He decided for whatever reason that he wanted to go back to junior hockey, and he's been, well, you know him better than me. Like you lived in Ontario, I lived in the West. He's the most successful coach in the Ontario Hockey League by a mile. He coached superstars. Ovechkin loved playing for him. Felt that he held them tight. I mentioned Trotz.
I just went John Tortorella, Rick Tocchet.
Yeah, Rick Tocchet. I've been really impressed by Rick Tocchet on TNT. Listening to him talk about hockey, I think that's would be an interesting choice. Dave Tippett's out there. Like there's, Kelly said we're not going to pigeonhole ourselves. This is a Stanley Cup contender. It really is. Like this team will enter next year as a Stanley Cup contender. I'd be shocked if it wasn't a guy with some experience. So, yeah, Trotz will be an interesting name for sure. Yeah, Quenneville is. I don't even know the situation there in Florida. He's still being paid.
Well, he's
by
suspended
Florida.
and he's under contract.
Yeah. But is he?
Just curious.
Because they've got a head coach right now, and they're in the second round of the playoffs. Like, would Bill Zito be really happy to say, hey, take him off my hands?
Well, Andrew Burnett depends on what happens there as well.
He's been offered an extension.
You mentioned,
I believe,
Gerard Gallant, and I want to get to that story.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like it's a great one.
That's funny.
But just comment on the three men that parted ways with the organization today: Pete DeBoer, Steve Spott, and Ryan McGill.
Well, I'll let you speak to Ryan because you know him better than me, and I was around him here, and I knew him as a coach in the American League before we got here. But super fun guy, and I'll let you talk about him. I really enjoyed Pete. I found Pete to be, very smart, giving of his time. We went through COVID where there was after the team lost in the bubble, and the season didn't start for a while, and there was a whole bunch of time off, and we didn't have a ton to do, so we put together this little golf group where there'd be a few of the broadcasters, a few of the coaching staff, and then some guys that we met in Vegas and have become friends. And we went on little tours, and it was my job to try and twist arms to get the golf pros to give us a good rate for golf. By good rate, I mean free. and then we drove out to Mesquite one time. We went to Reflection Bay. We went to Southern Highlands, Red Rock.
You can tell whose arms were twisted.
Yeah. They're all. I owe all those guys still. TPC Las Vegas, TPC Summerlin. They're all great to us. And I don't want to embarrass Pete, but he was making more money than the rest of us. Some of us were on. Anyways, every time after 9 holes, when we would stop for a beer and a sandwich, like, boom, his credit card, he couldn't get it down fast enough. He made sure that, he bought the first couple of rounds after we'd golf, like nice stuff. You know what I mean? Like, didn't have to do that, but wanted to, he was the leader of the organization in many ways. Kelly and George and Bill lead, and Kerry Buboltz lead upstairs, but Pete's the guy downstairs. That's his domain, and
there's no blurriness there. Like, Pete is a leader
for sure. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed being around him and getting to know him, and he could be very careful about what he said at times because he did not want to tip things to other coaches. But any time I had a question where I could text him and say, hey, can I get you for 30 seconds after the avail? The answer was always yes. and he'd say, "What do you got for me, Law?" And I'd tell him, ask him what I wanted to know, and would give a great, really thoughtful answer. Steve Spott, same thing, was an invaluable resource when we talked to him instead of Pete on. We have these meetings on game days, and often it's the head coach will talk to the broadcasters and give us some inside stuff that
we look smart.
We can hopefully use in the broadcast. Well, I've never looked smart, so it might be how you look smart. And Pete, it didn't do it every day. Ryan McGill was actually really good at it, and Spotter would, he had really good insight, and he's an Ontario guy. I'm an Ontario guy. Some have some connections. We know some of the same people, and really like a lot of the same music. So when I'm barbecuing on a Sunday night, I'd be listening to something, and I would text him with take the picture of the screenshot of the song on Spotify, and send it to him, and then there'd be a whole bunch of back and forth about that, and. And Ryan McGill and I, we always bet on when Winnipeg Blue Bombers played Calgary Stampeders, we would always have a little wager.
Pete, his intensity, I love it. I didn't know that as much as it's a big part of him coming into the season, but then be able to switch gears automatically, it's fascinating to watch and so brilliant.
You played hockey with him, and wasn't he really competitive in that?
He was great with that.
Yeah. But wasn't he competitive?
Yeah, he scored a hat trick.
Yeah.
That may have more to do with me than him, but still, draft pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
You're a good goalie.
And then Ryan McGill and Steve Spott, when you talk about Pete's intensity and being able to go to the other side, they are the fun-loving guys, great, but such an incredible knowledge base that they can go and go into game action just like that. Gerard Story.
Oh, he's gonna be mad at me.
Well, you're the one that brought it up, and I don't want to
I'm
let
bringing
you go.
it up. I texted him yesterday after they won to say congratulations on getting through, and he's got this blue suit that he wore, and he wore it when he coached here, and I didn't realize it, but it had it's got a pocket square sewn into it, and it might have another logo on it that anyways, that's it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, hold on. You tease this story.
I know.
And then
I'm thinking he's going to get mad
short.
at me. Okay. I shouldn't say it. It's got a Mickey Mouse logo on it on the inside of it. It was kind of funny. That's it.
Pete's coached 14 years in a row.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Pete's got it. Okay. Everyone in Winnipeg is screaming about Barry Trotz.
Yeah.
If Paul Maurice if Mark Chipman and Kevin Cheveldayoff pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Paul, who should we hire?"
Right.
It's Pete DeBoer. It sounds like Rick Bowness is not going to stick around in Dallas. I could see Pete. I could see Jim Nill speaking the same language as Pete. A whole bunch of places. Pete's getting a job if he wants one.
Yeah. The incredible part about Ryan McGill is he was part of Gerard's staff and meshed immediately with Pete's staff and Steve Spott. That gives you an idea of the people, right?
Kelly McCrimmon did a smart thing when he hired Pete. I think he must have agreed with Pete at the time that he was going to bring Steve Spott in as well, but they didn't bring Steve in. Remember, it was like 2 or 3 weeks. So Pete had to work with just the two Ryans for a little while, and they formed a bond, and then because it could have ended up being DeBoer and Spott versus the two Ryans, and instead it was they worked really well together, and they're good friends. Like they're always on the road together, having a meal or whatever. Like they were a pack. They stuck together.
Unique time in this franchise's history, the first time in 5 years where you're looking at an extended period without a head coach as this search goes on, because the Gerard transition to Pete happened immediately.
Yes. Yeah. And who knows how long this will take. Kelly McCrimmon he's got a list in his head for sure. Like he said, he hasn't thought about it. Okay, maybe he hasn't. When he does think about it, there'll be a list in his head pretty fast. And George is probably doodling on his legal pad right now as well. And then, you know what I mean? Like Von Karpen, Jim McKenzie, Bobby Lowe's, all these guys that are
hockey operations staff.
Yeah, and some of the smartest hockey people around, they'll have lists, they'll have ideas.
He also mentioned Mark Stone having surgery, and that's good news. For the uninformed, why is that good news?
Well, I'm kind of uninformed on it because I don't know what's wrong with Mark, but what I think it means is they've found a solution. Like, doctors don't open your back up on a guess. Somehow they've found agreement as to what's wrong with Mark and how to fix it. And Mark did say that he, has talked to a bunch of guys that have had similar situations to him. And so that Mark has become comfortable with what's the best thing for him. And the doctors have a solution as well. So let's just hope that that this is the solution in the right path, because Mark Stone's a heck of a hockey player, and you'd like him to go forward unimpeded. How about his big brother, Michael Stone, thrown into that series in Calgary? And then last night, Shillington got hurt. They were down to 4 or 5 for quite a while. Tanev didn't play last night, and he had an impact on that series. Good for him.
Mark Stone will be back for training camp. That's the expectation right now based on our updates today. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you, Gary.
A special edition of Knights Report. 6 weeks left in the Stanley Cup playoffs. A week after that, the National Hockey League draft. Gary, part of our coverage in Montreal on July 6th and the 7th and the 8th, leading into that. The first round on the 7th, and then the rounds 2 through 7 on the 8th. And then it's the development camp after that. Vegas Golden Knights are not bound on naming a head coach before that, but all the lists will be compiled, and a search process will take place during that period. You've watched a special edition of the Knights Report, brought to you by Smith's Food and Drug Stores from Studio 31 inside City National Arena. This is the Vegas Golden Knights.